Good evening. In a significant appeal which will be heard by the US Supreme Court, the US government has upheld the extradition of the terrorist Tahawwur Rana to India. If the appeal is accepted, Rana will be brought to India, a major battle to track down and prosecute those involved in the Mumbai 26/11 attack plot in which 166 people were killed. Tahawwur Hussain Rana, a Canadian citizen, was involved with David Coleman Headley in plotting terrorist attacks with the Lashkar-e-Taiba, including the 2008 Mumbai attacks. Rana was convicted in the United States for providing material support to terrorism, but was acquitted on charges related directly to the Mumbai attacks. The central question is whether Rana's extradition to India is barred by a clause in the extradition treaty between the US and India, which prevents an individual from being convicted or acquitted for the same offense twice, once in the US and once in India. But the US government argues that the offenses for which India seeks extradition have elements different from those that Rana was charged or acquitted for in the US. Therefore, extradition is not barred. What is Tahawwur Hussain Rana accused of, and what was his role in the Mumbai terror attacks? He allegedly helped the prime accused, David Coleman Headley, to obtain a business visa for reconnaissance in India under the guise of opening a Mumbai branch of his immigration business, providing material support to the Lashkar-e-Taiba, a terrorist organization. Rana was also involved, allegedly, in a plot to attack the Danish newspaper Jyllands-Posten, which had published controversial cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. India has sought Rana's extradition for his alleged role in the Mumbai attacks, charging him with conspiracy, waging war against the government of India, murder, and other terrorism-related offenses. Well, joining us now, David K. Johnson, an American journalist and author who's tracked this very closely. I'm also joined by General P.K. Sehgal, the defense expert. Thank you very much for being with us. Mr. Johnson, the fact that the United States government has now said that they essentially don't have any objection to Rana being extradited to India, do you believe that the case for that extradition is strengthened substantially, or do you believe that the Supreme Court would actually look at the merits of the case as it would on any other occasion?
Well, the Supreme Court will certainly look at the merits of the case, but Dr. Rana has a very weak argument. He was acquitted on some charges when he was tried in Chicago, but overall, the charges are not identical, and that the Biden administration's Solicitor General, that's the government attorney who represents the government before the Supreme Court, is arguing that the American-Indian treaty on extradition should be upheld, is a very powerful point against Dr. Rana. And given the nature of the crimes and that they're similar but not identical, I don't think double jeopardy, which is the issue Dr. Rana is trying to raise, is going to protect him. But he'll be able to delay this for a while. We will be into the next administration before any extradition actually takes place.
David, the fact that there was Headley, David Coleman Headley, who earlier on entered into a plea agreement with the United States. There were some reports which suggested that he may have been an informer for the DEA. Irrespective of that, there are many here in India who feel that justice was not delivered. There was no extradition possible despite India's efforts with Headley. How does Rana's case appear to be in stark contrast to the case against Headley?
Well, I mean, the simple answer to that is that Headley cut a deal, and people who go in and cut a deal that includes ratting out the other people around them, they get better treatment. It's as simple as that.
Let me just go across to General Sehgal at this stage. General, while getting Tahawwur Rana back in India, it would be very important in terms of prosecuting those involved in 26/11. It doesn't shut there, the entire case. There are many others, including handlers and the masterminds, who remain in Pakistan, right? But this would be an important chapter based on testimony or evidence that this man might provide. Is that the case?
Absolutely and totally true. The government of India has been very keen to know what was the role of the ISI, what was the role of the Pakistani army. And there's been an absolute and total conviction that not excluding these, even the Pakistani dispensation at that point of time was totally involved, which Pakistan has been continuously denying. So it's very, very important to hear from this gentleman as to how the entire operation was planned, what was the role of the ISI, what was the role of the Pakistani army, and what was the involvement of the Pakistani government at that point of time, which they continue to deny. They continue to deny that Lakfi was the mastermind. They continue to deny everything. They said so and so is dead, but later on they were found alive in Pakistan. So far, all of them have been enjoying the hospitality of the Pakistani government. Off and on, FATF pressure was put on them, put on the government. They were put into prison, but given a super VVIP treatment. So under the circumstances, Pakistan has been making a fool of India and fool of the rest of the world. If you recall, this operation lasted for 4 days. 12 different places the shootings took place. 175 people died. 166 from it within India, including 6 Americans and 9 of the 10 terrorists who died. Till date, initially, if you recall, the government of Pakistan even denied that Qasam was a Pakistani citizen. But much later, when the investigators from all over the world, including the news people went and interrogated his neighbors, etc., the Pakistani government at long last accepted the fact that he was a Pakistani citizen. So Pakistan has been in a denial mode right from the time this incident took place in 2008. The very fact that if it now appears that Rana, in all probability, will be extradited to India, and India is very keenly awaiting, because there are answers to very many questions that we still do not know, and it is time that we get to know. The country wants to get to know what was the involvement of the Pakistani nation as such, the Pakistani dispensation, because except for the ISI, the Pakistani army has completely said we are not involved. The Pakistani Navy says we are not involved. The Pakistani government...
Right. General Secretary, just give me a second. I just wanted to go back to David. You know, David, earlier in the day, I went through what the US government has put out in their appeal in the Supreme Court. There was this period when Rana was actually, during the COVID period, let out of jail. So he's been out on bail or whatever it is for a period of time. A person who many here in India believe was one of the masterminds in this entire thing. So it's been relatively easy for him, hasn't it?
Yes, he's gotten relatively light treatment in the sense that some people during COVID were let out on humanitarian grounds, just as we let people out sometimes for things like their mother's funeral with, or depending on their record, without armed guards taking them to a funeral. In this case, the Supreme Court may not even hear the case. I mean, they will certainly review the papers. What Dr. Rana has done is filed for something called certiorari, which is appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court to hear the case, because he's unhappy that the federal appeals court in San Francisco ruled against, or in California ruled against him. But they don't have to take the case. They certainly will review it, but they can reject the case. They can decide not to have oral argument. They can decide to have a full-blown hearing. That we'll have to see what happens. But at the end of the day, I can't imagine that the U.S. Supreme Court would deny extradition.
David, it's interesting that he was convicted in the U.S. for providing material support to terrorism, but was acquitted on charges related directly to the Mumbai attacks. Whereas over here in India, it's essentially one and the same. I mean, that's the line of argument which Indian prosecutors and lawyers have been stating. Does this, I mean, not appear odd or strange? I mean, how is it not one and the same if you're providing material support to terrorism? The terrorism took place in India, and yet the charges directly related to the Mumbai attacks, he was acquitted on that.
Well, I didn't attend the trial, and I don't know what motivated the jury that made this, I agree with you, odd decision. Sometimes those things hang on a simple issue of a single witness or document, and juries often try to find compromises with people. Unless they have someone they regard as utterly heinous, juries often try to find some kind of a compromise in a verdict, and that may well have been what happened here. But it doesn't help the Indian government to argue that these are one and the same case because, of course, Dr. Rana's argument is double jeopardy if they're one and the same case. They should be very heavily pushing, no, this is other charges. These are separate matters. They're related, but they are distinct.
And I think that's an argument which the US...
Certainly what I would teach my law students.
Yeah, and that's an argument which the US government appears to accept, that, look, it is very different. It may be part of the same case, but there are distinctions in what India is saying and India is seeking. General Sehgal, in terms of the role of Tahawwur Rana, you know, it's been a long time now since 2008 and those those dramatic hours and dramatic days and tragic days. Remind our viewers about what the role of Tahawwur Rana was.
He helped David Coleman Headley in a very major way to undertake reconnaissance 5 times. In fact, David Coleman Headley is the one who recorded all the iconic locations and not only recorded them, took videography of those and assisted the Pakistani elite in a very major way. And he was the key co-conspirator along with the Pakistani army and the ISI. And Rana helped him in a very, very major way to the extent that it was possible. Of course, it's been 16 years, memories have faded, but that notwithstanding, the government of India and the people of India still want to know what exactly happened, how the entire operation was planned, and why was it that it succeeded, and who all were involved in it. Was it only the Pakistani army on the ISI, or was it the Pakistani government that itself was involved? And this is something, should Rana's post-extradition questioning indicate to the world and indicate to India that the Pakistani government was involved, it would be a matter of absolute shame for the Pakistani government, and they would not know what to be. If you notice, even the President Trump government, when it comes, is going to be very, very tough on Pakistan vis-a-vis the Biden government. And even Tulsi Gabbard and the new Solicitor General, I'm going to look at this issue very differently vis-a-vis what the previous government has been looking at. But apparently the Biden government, for a change, has taken a very strong stand wherein they said he ought to be extradited. The Supreme Court should dismiss Rana's petition, where he does not want to be extradited to India under any circumstances.
Just go back to David on that. Is there a sense that the new Trump administration would be much harder when it comes to dealing with those with allegations of or charges of terrorism against them? Do you suspect a stronger stance, a position when it comes to these cases?
You always have to keep in mind that Donald Trump, who I've known and covered for 36 years, is mercurial. He sometimes does things that come out of nowhere and make no sense. But with that proviso, I would expect the Trump administration would be eager to turn Rana over to the Indian government. Now, the Indian government faces, I think, an interesting question. You can convict him, and you'll have a conviction of someone who's already been convicted in a related matter. But isn't what you really want to get him to rat out the people around him, to give you, as the general has pointed out, a full picture of here's what went on within Pakistani intelligence and the Pakistani military about this? I mean, that's his real value, is finding out the operational details of this, the key players whose fingerprints may not appear anywhere in material that the Indian or American governments have, to understand what went on here and who the players are that need to be carefully surveyed and watched in the future.
In a sense, would you say, David, that the trial in the United States never looked at some of the key issues which India has been always arguing about, which is that Pakistan has been a central player in this, they are central as far as terrorism in this part of the world is concerned, whereas the US may perhaps have been looking at it from the perspective of American citizens who lost their lives in Mumbai?
Well, one of the things I teach my law students is that prosecutors don't bring the best case. They bring the case they can win, the one that they are confident that they will win. So many times, the most important charge against someone is not even included in an indictment. Because that's the way you win cases, is you focus on what's the case that jury will buy And in this case, they were clearly not fully successful because he was acquitted on some charges. And you always have to keep that in mind about prosecutors everywhere. That's a fundamental principle I teach my law students, that you want to focus on what you can sell to a jury, not on what would be the ideal model case.
David, there's always been a sense, and I asked you this a little while earlier as well, but the sense about David Coleman Headley is that he was an informant of the US at some level, and that therefore he was protected. How strong have these allegations been? Is there truth in that? Has anything emerged?
Yeah. I don't know about the details of Headley personally, but it is very common that people engaged in crimes are themselves informants to the government in other areas. We have in New York City, in Brooklyn in particular, a number of cases where Russian emigres have been committing crimes left and right, but they have been protected by the US Justice Department under both Republican and Democratic presidents because they were apparently providing intelligence about the Russians and others. And so when you're in this murky world of people who commit crimes, especially for ideological reasons, they often have things to trade. And intelligence is often held in higher esteem by governments, being more important to the long-term interests of governments than specific criminal cases.
All right, David K. Johnston and General Sehgal, thank you both very much for being with us. Thank you very much indeed. Well, earlier on, I spoke to the senior lawyer Ujjwal Nikam. He's tracked 2611 very, very closely. And I spoke to him about the significance of Tahawwur Rana potentially coming back to India. Remember, the US government has stated that they don't essentially have any objection to him. This in a deposition that they've made to the US Supreme Court. Well, joining us now, somebody who's followed the 2611 proceedings very, very closely indeed. Thank you, Ujjwal Nikam, for being with us. What does Tahawwur Rana's extradition or potential extradition to India mean by, especially in terms of new evidence or new testimonies? How would that further India's case?
Indeed, US government has taken a very strong decision because Tahawwur Rana has made an appeal in the US Supreme Court alleging that I cannot be extradited to India because on the same charge for which India wants to extradite me is being already tried by the Chicago court, and therefore, according to the American law, there is a double jeopardy bar, and I cannot be tried for the same offenses in India. But India's contention was that no, Tahawwur Rana was not tried for the offense of the forgery and some other offenses, that is the international conspiracy, and for which India has said that the Chicago court has tried him for another offenses. And US government has examined the matter thoroughly, and US government has arrived at a conclusion that Tahawwur Rana was never tried for the forgery charge, and therefore his contention has no merit, and therefore US government has taken a stand in the US Supreme Court that his appeal should be dismissed. That is a bold stand taken by the US government.
Sir, could you tell our viewers the role of Tahawwur Rana in the 2611 conspiracy?
Tahawwur Rana, basically, he was a Pakistani national. Later on, he accepted the US citizenship. But Tahawwur Rana and David Headley, in fact, he was also working with Tahawwur Rana.
Yeah.
David Headley is also the Pakistani national. And David Headley had visited Mumbai before the terror attack of 26 November and even after the terror attack. And David Headley had opened the office, that is the immigration office, with the help of the Tahawwur Rana in Mumbai. So Tahawwur Rana is a key pin in the entire criminal conspiracy behind the terror attack of 26 November. And therefore, the US government has, of course, the Chicago court has convicted him for some offenses. And therefore, India has asked for his extradition for trying him some offenses in India. However, Tahawwur Rana has taken that plea, I cannot be tried because double jeopardy bar is there. And US government has informed to the US Supreme Court that no, there is no merit in it.
But let me ask you this, David Coleman Headley got into a plea bargain arrangement with the US government on the basis of which he wasn't extradited to India, he wasn't extradited to Denmark because he was a part of a plot to attack a Danish newspaper as well. What happened over there? And, you know, I mean, in as much as Rana might end up being a success for us, the fact is we'll never get Headley back, right?
David Headley entered into plea bargain agreement with the US government, and on the basis of plea bargain agreement, David Headley has been given the sentence for 35 years by the Chicago court. However, Tahawwur Rana did not accept or did not enter into plea bargain agreement, and therefore he was tried in Chicago court and he has been convicted, already convicted. And therefore, the Indian government has asked for the extradition of Tahawwur Rana for the charges, that is his involvement in the, not only in the 26th November, but also some other cases. And therefore, Tahawwur Rana has taken that plea. Of course, that plea is now not maintainable, according to me. Now, it is for the US Supreme Court to take a final call in the matter. But I am very optimistic because the Indian government has played a very wonderful role in the entire thing. And the US government has also accepted the India stand.
Mr. Nikam, if we were to get Rana back, do you believe that the direct hand of Pakistan and his handlers and others in the Pakistani establishment would be clearly established if he were to be brought back to India?
I'm very positive in saying, because I have examined the David Headley in Mumbai court, and David Headley has also given certain email correspondence, telephone numbers, mobile numbers of the ISI officials in the Chicago court, which I also produced in Mumbai court. Tahawwur Rana, because of the help of the David Headley, Tahawwur Rana has opened the office in Mumbai, and Tahawwur Rana had also visited Mumbai before the terror attack of 26th November. So I have the doubt that Tahawwur Rana must be knowing all the details of the criminal conspiracy. Perhaps he must have the close association with the Pakistan security apparatus. But of course, it will come only in light only when he will be extradited.
A basic question, he was a Lashkar-e-Taiba operative. That's the bottom line, right?
Absolutely correct.
And do you, in terms of the overall 2611 investigation, obviously we got hold of Kasab in the early phases. Headley may not ever be extradited. Rana might be extradited. Will there ever be closure in terms of India's, investigation into the entire case? Would that end with Rana?
No, it won't be closure of the entire case, because we still want Hafiz Saeed, Zakir Rahman Lakwi, and some other wanted people. Of course, they are in the Pakistan. Pakistan has not yet arrested Hafiz Saeed and Zakir Rahman Lakwi, though we have furnished them the tangible evidence against the main conspirator. So I won't say that it will be a closure of the case, but one or the other day, Pakistan will require to extradite it or deport, because we don't have extradition treaty.
Right. Mr. Nikam, thank you very much, sir, for speaking to us and explaining all of that. Thank you very much indeed. Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. There's more coming up.